Seksas nėra pati patogiausia tema diskusijai. Neatliekama ir užtektinai tyrimų, todėl mokslininkams trūksta nemažai duomenų apie tai, kas vyksta žmogaus kūne sekso metu, nuo ko priklauso seksualumas, kokios bėdos pasitaiko dažniausiai ir kokie mitai jį supa. Tai supratęs Ispanų biochemikas, mokslo populiarintojas nutarė parašyti knygą apie sekso mokslą. Jis duomenis rinko daugiau negu 3 metus ir pats dalyvavo eksperimentuose. Su juo pasikalbėjome, ką apie seksą jau žino mokslas ir kokias spragas dar reikia užpildyti. What is the science of sex?
Very straightforward the question, no? No, the scientists study a lot of things. The science study our behavior, our physiology, how the brain works in different circumstances. So I was shocked, being a science journalist, that I hadn't done research about how scientists study sexual behavior. And sexual behavior depends of our hormones, depends of what we learn, depends on the psychology, the influences of our environment. So it's very multidisciplinary. So there are different fields of science that studies sexual behavior, and I found it really interesting, and that's why I end up writing quite a long book.
Mm-hmm. We will speak about your book, but now can you give me a couple of examples how sex is being researched and what methods are being used to get to know more about it?
Well, I think that the most relevant is when something goes wrong, and this ends up being medicine. If in the past, lack of desire, lack of erection in men, premature ejaculation have been studied because people suffer of having these things, and they were reluctant to go to the doctor or the psychologist, but researchers said, hey, this is a function of the body that should work well, and they learn the mechanisms, the physiological mechanisms of erection, for example, and they discovered that the oxide nitrogen was involved, and then at the end discovered that a pill like Viagra helped erection. With lack of desire in women, for example, it's more psychological than physical, but in certain cases they found that women with a good environment, with nice couples, with a good psychology, they also have lack of desire and might be related to some hormones or fluctuations of the menstrual cycles. This is the biological side. But then sociology studies casual sex, for example, how has evolved in the last decades, how online dating, Tinder, or the hookup culture is changing some of our behaviors. So I'm putting two extremes, from more sociological studies to the more biological, even genetic ones. There's been even twin studies to compare issues like multi-orgasms. Sisters that one has multi-orgasms is correlated to the twin sister or the sister that it's not identical in the sense of is multi-orgasm has some genetical background, and they discover yes. And the structure of the genitals, the G-spot, the different kinds of orgasms. If you stimulate the clitoris or stimulate the internal part of the vagina, there are different nerves that send this information to the brain. And it makes sense that the sensations are different. It's not the same if you stimulate the hypogastric nerve or the pelvic nerve or the pudental nerve. They have different circumstances. So it's part of the neuroendocrinology of sex.
Mm-hmm. You wrote a book on the science of sex. How did you come up with the idea?
I was in the Society for Neuroscience conference, surrounded by people studying Parkinson, dementia, sleep, memory. And I saw a poster of someone studying sexual desire with rats. And it was shocking because this researcher was stimulating the clitoris of the rats with a brush in order to understand how hormones involve in in the desire, in the sense that she was giving hormones to certain rats, certain kinds of hormones to certain rats, and none to others, and was comparing. And I thought it was amusing. I thought it was fun. And she said, "Hey, that's important. Maybe it's more important than other topics that the scientists, the neuroscientists are studying here, because it affects many people." And she gave me numbers of problems associated with sexuality, and I thought it was studied and underreported by us. Because when we talk about sex, there is always this connotation of something fun or something seems non-important, and it is. That's why I decided to study, to go in depth in that research and open up to other kinds of research.
We will speak more about your book, but you have a very interesting title. You are the first man in the world to have an orgasm under an MRI scan. Can you tell me more about that?
Do you want the details or?
No. Just the results.
The results. The most interesting was not the result, but the procedure. The procedure. No, the thing is that I was interviewing Barry Komisaruk, that's a neuroscientist that was studying from the first stimulation to orgasm, which areas of the brain get active, starting from some areas in the cortex, going to the amygdala, to the hippocampus, and he was doing these studies with women, and he had discovered interesting things, and he was going to start a study with men, and suddenly he told me, "Would you like to be a volunteer?" I said, "I don't know, because as you can imagine, my goal is to reach an orgasm by myself under the brain scan without moving at all my head." Because the image is that was the challenge, no? And at the beginning I said, "I don't know," but then he said, "You would be the first man ever to have an orgasm under an fMRI." And I said, "Well, that's interesting for the book, and sure that journalists asked me about this," and I did.
Let's go back to your book, and what do you wish you knew before you wrote the book?
Wow, that's an interesting question. The issue of what's normal in sex, it has changed a lot. Some behaviors, BDSM, open marriages, swingers, polyamory, I was a bit skeptic about these behaviors, saying that, of course, people is free to do whatever they want, but it was not normal in the sense that most people consider normal. I was not open to try different aspects apart from conventional sex. Doing this research, I tried nearly all of them, even tantric sex and other practices, and I would say that some of them I enjoy more, other less, but I've learned a lot of all of them, no? And probably what I thought that it was a good sexual life, I didn't know it could be better. No, so I was happy with my sexual life before the book, but I didn't know it could improve a lot.
What about misconceptions? Did you have any misconception prior to writing the book that you've found out during the process of writing?
Yes, several. One is what I've said before, that there are many more people with sexual dysfunctions, physical or psychological, than I thought. At different ages, there are different sexual dysfunctions, but the numbers are big, and it's something that's a bit silenced in society. No, another is this differences between genders. Men are from Venus and women are from Mars, or the contrary. We are not so different. Of course, physically, our biology the hormones are different, but when you do meta-analysis about behavior, when you analyze even the structure of the genitals, and you see that the clitoris and a penis is exactly the same.
What do you mean by exactly the same? Can you extend on this a little bit more?
They come from the same, at the embryonic level, from the same structures. And there is a moment when there is a release, because there is a gene that's activated during the embryonic stage, that is SRI gene, that creates a bit more of testosterone, and the gonads, if you are a woman, stays as ovaries. If you are a man, it goes as testicles. But it comes from the same. And the penis grows and goes out of the body if you are a man, but it stays inside. The structures are the same if you are a woman. So when you make contact with the external part of the penis or with the clitoris, the nerves that send the same information. It's simple. It's simply a different way to put the same structure. That's what I meant when they are exactly the same. Of course, it's not exactly in the sense that the penis is bigger than the clitoris, but the clitoris is much bigger inside the body. It's not only the part that's outside the body, the small part that's outside the body. It has like the shaft of the penis inside, and that's related, and it has an erection. The inner part of the clitoris grows when the woman is excited, and that's why you feel pleasure when you stimulate the internal part of the vagina, because you contact sometimes the internal part of the clitoris, because when it's erect, and you find this is the G spot. The G spot is a place where you move your fingers or something upwards, and you contact the bases of the internal clitoris. But even with behavior, there are a few behaviors that are different, but most are more similar when you make big numbers than it's thought.
Mm-hmm. What was the most surprising thing that you learned about sex during your research, maybe your research for the book?
There are surprises at a scientific level, and there are surprises at a more sociological level. No, for example, even a personal level. You've heard sometimes that some men can be multi-orgasmic. I thought that there are only a few of them that can become multi-orgasmic. A tantric expert explained me the difference between orgasm and ejaculation, and how orgasm is the activity of nerves, and ejaculation is the activity of some muscles, and you can separate. And if you have orgasm without ejaculation, you don't lose the erection, and you can continue having an intercourse or a sexual relationship until you get another orgasm. And I tried, and I got it, and that was wow. That was a big surprise, because I didn't think that this was possible. Then some surprises about the diversity of sexual behavior. There are many more people with fetishes or with open relationships that I thought, because at the end, if you are not inside the circles of sex-positive people, or you have a conventional life, you don't get along with these kind of people. And at a scientific level, plenty of them, no? For example, what they call sexual concordance in women is how, when you show sexual images to women and ask them, do you like them or not? And at the same time, you measure the reaction of the genitals to see if the clitoris is excited or not, it grows or not. You see that sometimes there is no sexual concordance, in the sense that they are different. for example, with being two women at the same time, or someone being aggressive, that you psychologically say, I don't like this, but the genitals react saying, we like that. So this was an interesting finding.
So generally, is sex good for your health?
There's been some exaggeration on that. O sea, yes, it's good. It's good, especially for the psychology. You feel better if you have a good sexual life. It's not that being sexually active helps your immune system or you have less cancer or things like that. If there is a factor, it's a very small factor, because at least science hasn't found a big correlation. It's good for your psychology if you have a good sexual life. And good sexual life doesn't mean to have a lot of sex. It means simply to be happy with your sexual life. That, let's say, at the contrary, people that have issues, that have regrets or would like to be doing something that they can't do, and that affects a lot the well-being of people.
What happens to our bodies during arousal, during sex, and during orgasm?
Wow, plenty of things. During arousal, let's say the sympathetic nervous system starts getting active. So we have, our nervous system has two states: a sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So this blood goes to the genital and goes to the muscles and releases dopamine and other neurotransmitters, that even cortisol and adrenaline, that wakes us up, and it's like we are more physically excited, but in the sense not only of sexually excited. In general, our body is more excited. And then when we start, let's say, the friction, the sexual intercourse, the excitement, then other neurotransmitters start activating areas of the brain. The nerves that sends information from the genitals to the mind, well, sends a specific information that little by little activates several areas correlated with orgasm. And during orgasm, there are obvious things like ejaculation, but other not so obvious, like releasing, for example, oxytocin. That's an hormone that gives us pleasure and satisfaction. There is this huge activation of the sympathetic nervous system. For example, our blood pressure increases a lot. The heart rate also increases, and you can notice that. In this sense, you can see if someone is faking an orgasm. So if it shouts and if it screams and it gesticulates, but the heart rate is not fast, and the blood pressure, and you can see the blood pressure in the cheeks or even in the breast, is white, that it's a fake orgasm.
Thank you for the advice. And during your TED Talk, you mentioned that orgasms are all brain orgasms. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, the signal of activating the orgasm comes from the brain. Ejaculation, no. You can force the ejaculation even with animals. You can do to get the semen, but the orgasm comes from the brain. And normally, the information grows from the genital through the spinal cord, through the nerves, to those areas in the brain, and there is a moment when the brain says, now. But you can also activate these areas through other means, through other routes. for example, with nipple stimulation or even doing intense exercise, or they call non-genital orgasms, and for example, during sleep, people get orgasms during sleep, and it's not through the activation of the genitals, it's through the activation by other routes of these areas of the brain. It always, so the genitals are important, but the brain is necessary.
Why are we attracted to a certain person but not to another?
Well, that depends on many factors. Our culture, it depends of how we are, affects what we like, and similarity is a factor. Symmetry is another factor, but it depends a lot. So there are some general rules of attraction. Symmetry would be a general rule of attraction. The traits that are very characteristic of men or of women are also general rules of attraction, but then it depends a lot of our stories, our life. So if someone reminds us, even unconsciously, someone that we had a good sexual intercourse, that affects our preferences. It changes a lot, and you can see that with now it's very easy to do studies with online dating. Before that, scientists did surveys. They show you several faces or several body types, and they ask you which one you preference. But now that you have so much data from Tinder, from sites, you can make correlates, no? And it's part of a mystery, you know? It's good that it's still a mystery.
Yeah, it's a good thing we have more data. We just need to analyze it. What are the top 3 or maybe more things you as a scientist would recommend everyone to improve their sex lives?
As a scientist, as a scientist, we always say that information is power, in the sense that the most information you have, the better decisions you'll make. So knowing how your body works gives you a lot of confidence. For example, men sometimes have premature ejaculation when they are nervous. So knowing that and knowing what are the signs of having some sympathetic fibers active can predict that you'll end up having this problem of premature ejaculation. So reading a book like mine or other books about sex that gives you information, that helps you to improve your sex life. Another advice I would give is that if there is something that you feel is not totally okay in your sex life, go to a psychologist or go to a doctor and ask. Because many people don't do that. Many people, it's not that I'm saying that, it's what literature says. Many people don't consider it like a health or mental issue because they assume that with age or with circumstances that could happen. Hey, don't assume that well-being is important. So if you are not happy with that, ask, in the same sense that if you think that there is something wrong with your knee, you can walk. But if you think there is something wrong, you normally go to a doctor saying, hey, I think there is something wrong here. Can you check it out? Do the same with the sex life. And then, as a scientist, I would say experience, doing experiments is important. It's not only the theory.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and for answering my questions.
Thank you, God. A great pleasure.
Tai tiek, ačiū, kad žiūrėjote ir likite su Delfi televizija.